Hi, my name is Annette Jones, and my class presentation is on the topic of using race-based versus class-based affirmative action in admitting students to college. The title of the article that I'm doing my class presentation on is Race-Based versus Class-Based Affirmative Action in College Admissions, and below you will see the citation of the article. The first key concept noted in the article discusses how affirmative action is now under attack. Some argue that racism is no longer a problem. In fact, they feel that using race-based policies is inappropriate. There has been some court decisions suggesting that race-based scholarships and admission policies may be unconstitutional. Thus, because of the controversy regarding race-based policies, some institutions have in fact moved away from using these race-based policies and are moving now towards programs based on alternative definitions of disadvantage. There is argument for the need for some sort of affirmative action program with a broader definition of disadvantaged, focusing more on socioeconomic status variables rather than race. One such proposal for an alternative definition is for class-based affirmative action policies. Some believe this will lead to a fairer process, it is more politically correct, and it's a means to a similar end. The purpose of the article is to attempt to simulate the impact of moving from a race-based to class-based affirmative action program. In the article, the author addresses two questions. The first question is class-based affirmative action just another means to the same end? And the second question is, how would eligibility for class-based affirmative action be determined, and what are the implications for administration of such a program? To simulate the impact of a move from race-based to class-based affirmative action in college admissions, the author uses data from the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth. The National Longitudinal Survey of Youth contains over 4,000 youths from whom information on family income and living arrangements are collected. Important in the analysis of the data, it has to be determined who exactly is disadvantaged. The author had to consider how an individual's socioeconomic status or class is to be determined. If affirmative action programs depend on individuals' membership in a disadvantaged category or group, one must consider two issues. The first is that eligibility should be based on factors that can be independently verifiable. Factors such as family income may be verified by using tax returns. However, factors such as family background, to include family dysfunction, instability, or substance abuse, are factors that may be difficult to assess or verify. The second issue is for the potential for affirmative action eligibility standards to affect incentives. Some people may be encouraged because of incentives to identify themselves with a particular criteria in order to qualify for the class-based program. The author noted that in matters of race-based affirmative action programs, the criteria for race or ethnicity is limited. You are born into your race, and this cannot be distorted. However, criteria such as family structure, residence, family income, or school quality may be altered. These are sometimes by choice and can be changed over time. In the analysis of data, the author uses the following verifiable criteria to base eligibility for class-based affirmative action programs: youth, who are classified according to whether they always, sometimes, or never live in poverty from age 15 to 17, whether they ever lived with a parent who had at least a high school diploma or a college degree, and whether they always, sometimes, or never live with both biological parents from age 15 to 17. The results indicate that the percentage of minority youth who lived in families with income below the poverty line in each year from the age 15 to 17 was only 15%. Minority youth who live in families that were poor in at least 1 year was 48%. Minority youth with scores at or above the 20th percentile who never lived with a parent with at least a high school diploma was 43%. And minority youth who never lived with both biological parents between the age of 15 and 17 was 41%. So as you can see from the results, the proportion of minority youths qualifying for programs based on socioeconomic disadvantage would vary from the criteria used. Categories such as poverty status, resident, parents, education, and family structure revealed that many minority youth would not be eligible for class-based affirmative action. The answers to the questions reveal that these results show that class-based affirmative action would result in substantially different pools of eligible individuals than race-based programs. The selection criteria would not allow all minority students to qualify. Even though race and ethnic minorities are overrepresented among the socioeconomic disadvantaged, class-based programs are unlikely to achieve the same answer as race-based programs. Class-based affirmative action may be difficult to implement and justify if alternative definitions of disadvantage result in very different pools of eligible applicants. And so, as you can see, that race-based 100% of those eligible for programs targeting racial and minorities are eligible. However, with class-based programs, the percent will vary based on the criteria used. Thus, developing criteria by which to identify disadvantaged youths raises questions about the feasibility of class-based approaches. This article is important in understanding the need to continue to use affirmative action policies to ensure that underrepresented populations have equal access to higher education opportunities and that they're given a fair chance to contribute their talents and abilities to society. This article was very important in allowing those who argue that class-based affirmative action is a means to the same end as race-based affirmative action is not true. When using class-based affirmative action policies, the criteria used for selection measures results in different pools of eligible students. Thus, the percentage of minority students who qualify for those class-based scholarships and/or admission will be different. However, with race-based processes, 100% of those minority students who qualify will be eligible based on race. When higher ed officials consider to use class-based programs, they must pay attention to what criteria is used in the selection of students. The two affirmative action policy debate issues noted were those who would choose to eliminate programs based on race and ethnicity versus those who would choose to replace with the affirmative action policy with an alternative definition of disadvantaged using such processes as class-based affirmative action policies. Supporters of getting rid of affirmative action policies feel that there is no longer a need in our society to support such systems. They feel that reaching a colorblind society is not possible by using affirmative action policies, specifically race-based policies. However, there are those who still see the need of affirmative action, but there conclude there needs to be alternative definitions to disadvantaged populations. They propose categories based on class-based affirmative action policies in which socioeconomic status is the focus. These supporters conclude that class-based affirmative action would lead to similar results as race-based affirmative action. So the pros for race-based programs is that you're born into your race, and that cannot be altered. However, this is narrowly defined. The cons, however, is that it appears unconstitutional, ethnically and racially biased. For class-based programs, the pros that they're more politically palatable and they appear to be fair. The cons are that they're broadly defined, race or ethnicity is not a factor, and there's potential for strategic misrepresentation. This concludes my presentation about the article Race-Based versus Class-Based Affirmative Action in College Admission. The last slide I have the 3 questions posted. The first is in the article, the argument that race no longer matters. Do you agree or disagree with this thought? Why or why not? Number 2, what are your thoughts about moving from a race-based affirmative policy to a class-based affirmative policy and its effect in ensuring a diverse population on college campus? Number 3, if you were tasked with creating a class-based program, what criteria do you feel would be most important in the selection process? Thank you, and I look forward to reading your responses.